Hello everyone, this is Insta here. Hope you guys are all doing great. I had to make this video really quick. This is meant for my viewers who have been very supportive of me for the last couple of years, even though I have uploaded very infrequently, which I know, which I'm also going to address in this video. So this video is mainly going to be about is one of my fanfiction series that I was writing, mainly Pacific Rim Kaiju Chronicles. I've written one book, which I've released I think almost 2 years ago. 2023 September, if I'm not mistaken, was when I started releasing the first book of Pacific Rim Kaiju Chronicles. It was this fanfiction, something that I've had in mind for ever since I was like a teenager. I remember coming up with the idea of, hey, what if we combine the lore of the Pacific Rim film with the lore of the kaijus of, Godzilla and, King Ghidorah, Rodan, all that stuff. What if we combine those? Wouldn't that be awesome? And that was what this series was going to be about. It was a fan fiction. It was going to consist out of 3 books, which I've finished 1 book. And of course, the first book, what was it about? Just to give you a very quick recap, I'm sure if you were watching this video and you're interested in what I'm gonna say, I'm sure you've already, listened or viewed my first book. It was basically to give you, first of all, a backstory. The world is another terror. Kaijus are, attacking us. They're getting more and more stronger. And the prime defense of mankind, being the Jaegers, is failing, and they're looking for new ways to combat the kaijus. Not only that, but as some scientists throughout this book discover, it's not only that we are failing, but the kaijus themselves are also getting stronger. They're coming up with this plan, and it all amounts to them summoning their king, and their king being King Ghidorah, who rises at the end of the very last episode, episode 9 of the first book, and we end on this huge cliffhanger. Now, there are all sorts of characters in this. We had the characters of the Pacific Rim film, Raleigh, Mako, Stacker, Amara, also some characters from the sequel, Uprising, which I know wasn't really regarded in one of the best lights, but still, they were there. We also had characters from the 2014 Godzilla film, Sarazawa, Vivienne, Stans, Ford, Elle, Joe, Sandra, and also characters from the 1998 version, Nick and Audrey and Philip and Hicks and everyone. They would all combine. It was this fun mash. It was always meant to be 3 books, and here we are 2 years later, and there's still no book 2. And I know some of you have kept asking me, where's book 2? And every time that I've posted a video which wasn't about, book 2, you always, not always, but vastly ask me, what's up? And, the big one is that I simply lost interest. 2 years ago, 2023, I had this very big kaiju resurgence in myself, where I started, rewatching many of those films. And I really thought, how cool would it be to actually bring life into that teenage fanfiction dream? And I'm honestly very happy that I fully wrote the first book. But then I actually started working on book 2. I started working on it and I wrote 1 episode, 1.5, and I just stopped. Because I found myself struggling to have characters going from point A to point B to point C in logical, natural ways. There were tons of plot holes, starting to sum up, that I just had a hard time, figuring out how to fix those. And I'm gonna be very real with you, let's be honest, my first book also contained lots of plot holes. There were things that happened in that if you just think about it, don't really make all too much sense. And I guess you could say, but it's not really the genre to really be sensitive about plot holes, but to be honest, I am always a little bit annoyed with myself if I find out that there's like something that you get really easily just sideway, or that you can just really easily solve, but like the characters can't, because, you know, otherwise you're not gonna get your story the way you want to. And that's it. So I wrote 1.5 episodes of the second book, and I just stopped. Also, if I'm gonna look at my numbers, that first book, although I really appreciate the people who liked it, honestly, I really do, but it just didn't really get the numbers I was kind of hoping for. If I look back at my other works, such as my movie rewrite of Jurassic World Dominion, and still to this day, my most popular one, the Robbers Rebellion miniseries, that got like tons of love, which I didn't expect, and I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I liked it. And if all my content, if all my rewrites and my fanfiction and my reviews and whatever would get that amount of support and love, that would be awesome. And I was hoping that my Kaiju Chronicles would receive the same kind of attention, but it didn't. It didn't get any numbers. And that was also a little bit disappointing. I'm being 100% real with you. That being said, I know that I'm talking pretty negatively right now, and I don't really want to, you know, like be this grumpy person like, don't worry, I'm not going to be completely negative, because I do realize that for those of you guys who really want to know what I had in mind, I gotta tell you, and I'm going to, right now, very quickly, right now, because some things I really had in mind, and other things I had no idea where I was going, and I'm gonna be very open with that. So right now, I'm gonna give you a overview of my plans for book 2 and book 3. Now, very quickly, there were always gonna be 3 books. The first book called Humans, the second book called Hunters, and the third book called Titans. Book 1 was gonna have 9 episodes, which it did. Book 2 was gonna have 10 episodes. Book 3 was gonna have 6 episodes. It was the goal that by the end of book 1, you had all your antagonists, well, almost your antagonists in place, because it ends with Monster Zero, King Ghidorah rising, and that was gonna be like the beginning of the great, well, shitstorm, let's call it like this. Book 2 would start off dealing with that. The first episode of the second book, which was called Monsuta Zero Dawn, after the finale of book 1 was called Monsuta Zero Rise, it was gonna be all about dealing with the incident that takes place in the finale of the first book. You know, King Ghidorah rose up and everyone has to deal with it, and they can detect that there is so much going on beneath the surface of the earth. Tens of, maybe hundreds of kaijus are about to rise, and they just have to figure out what they can do. This would lead to episode 2, called Rodan. Now, Rodan is exactly about what you think it's gonna be about. I would take the scene from the film King of the Monsters, where Rodan explodes out of that volcano, and I would stretch it out over an entire episode. Now, this is where my problems really started to rise, because I needed to have Joe and Sandra, the parents of Ford from the 2014 version of Godzilla, I needed to have them in that town. And I needed Ford to be there as well. Not only that, but I also needed Audrey to be there and introduce a new character, fan favorite character of Hank Azaria, Animal from the 1998 Godzilla film, would also make his appearance in this episode. Everyone would be in that town to investigate, but it would make no sense for them to just go there. You know what I mean? So that was really my first big plot hole that I just couldn't find a way around. So in Rodan, just have it go like this, lots of people are there, and it would end with Rodan exploding out that volcano and destroying everything, and it would mean the death of Joe and Sandra, leaving Ford in this very emotional state. Audrey and Animal would manage to escape. Everyone would manage to escape except for Joe and Sandra, so it would be this big emotional moment. Leading up to our third episode, Mako. Mako was going to center mainly around, well, the character Mako from Pacific Rim, because she's heavily shown in my first book, but you know very little about her. And this was really going to be her backstory episode, which if you've seen Pacific Rim, you know what her backstory is, but this is also going to be stretched out across an entire episode. Book 2 in general was gonna be very character driven. It's gonna be the most character driven book out of all of them. Because, you know, it's gonna end, well, this episode 3, Mako was gonna end with her really reconciling with her father, well, father figure, you know, Stacker, and it's gonna have all these revelations about their relationship, and it would be very wholesome. This would lead to episode 4 called Young Hunters Part 2. Part 1 of Young Hunters was episode 8 from the first book. This was gonna be another character-driven episode where we would have our main characters just at the headquarters in Hong Kong. You know, Raleigh, Mako, Stacker, Jake, Amara. Jake and Amara would also be there. The son of Stacker, if I'm not mistaken, they would also be more prominent because Amara wasn't really shown in the first books. Jake was, but only like 1 or 2 times. Jake was gonna have this nice character evolution in book 2, him shifting from this, you know, junkie party guy, thug, to an actual warrior, not a leader, but an actual good soldier, making his father proud, and him also seeing his own mistakes and everything. So it was also going to be a character evolution there, leading to our 5th episode, Musuko. Now Musuko was going to be fully about Jake. About his backstory, why he became the petty thug, you know, he was in the first book, and also his relation with his father, Stacker. And we're gonna see that Stacker really wasn't the perfect father. He was actually much more of a father to Mako than to his own son. But it's not like we're gonna paint Stacker in some sort of, you know, bad light. It was just the way it was, because Mako was this very promising young lady, while his own son was an actual thug. He wasn't throwing everything away, he wasn't using his status and his skills for the greater good, and that just disappointed Stacker. So it was going to be like this whole reconciliation. Halfway through book 2, we're going to have lots of character dynamics that have all shifted from troublesome to wholesome. That's the end of that episode. Shift with the rift, you know, where all the kaijus are coming from the Pacific Ocean, to break apart even more, and it would end on this big cliffhanger that the city of Hong Kong, well, their headquarters was going to be under attack. And this would lead to a huge battle, very similarly to the Battle of Pacific Rim, where they're trying to defend their Hong Kong base at night from these 2 kaijus. Only now it's going to be bigger and it's going to be longer, because we're going to have episode 6 called With Steel Against Claws Part 1, followed by episode 7 with Steel Against Claws Part 2. It's going to be this huge battle and everyone's going to be in it. And, you know, fighting, kaiju action was going to be big, brutal. There's gonna be some gory kaiju deaths, you know, it's gonna be this very anime Attack on Titan style fighting almost, which would lead to episode 7 with Steel Against Claws Part 2, ending with this big cliffhanger, because you're gonna have Chuck. Chuck has always been a troublesome character, especially also in book 1, but it was gonna continue in book 2, that Chuck was going to be this very, you know, bully almost. But you never really know why. You know, things are troubling him, he can't get along with his father, Herc, but you don't know why. And it continues in book 2, and it's gonna, at the end of episode 7, it's gonna be this very dire situation where Raleigh and Mako are almost gonna die, you know, almost gonna die, and there's just nothing really that can be done. And Chuck, in his own Jaeger, is gonna be the only one really able to save them, and it's gonna be this big cliffhanger. Like, is he gonna save them? Is he gonna find the courage to save them? You don't know. And the episode is gonna end with that. And that's what's gonna lead us to episode 8, Gomen. Gomen, this episode, is another backstory episode, but entirely about Chuck. It's gonna set several years in the past, where we see that Chuck was actually a very kind guy and was having a fiancé. And he and his fiancé was kind of like this, you know, this power couple. They had their own Jaeger, they were this big example for the Force, and it was all very nice. And it was going to be this very wholesome episode, which would end in tragedy with Chuck's fiancé dying in combat. And all because he wouldn't get any help. It was also going to be this very dire situation, and they needed help as fast as they could, but they couldn't get to him, they couldn't reach him, they weren't there in time. I don't know, it would lead to Chuck not only losing his fiance, but also just causing this huge rift between him and his father, and also Stacker eventually, which would explain his attitude to each and everyone else during the first and also mainly the second book. But this episode would end on a very powerful note, because he remembers the words of his fiance, that he never lose faith and everything, these very emotionally powerful words. So he would eventually, we the audience would eventually jump forward to present day, coming to the rescue, rescuing Raleigh and Mako during the fight, and actually showing to us that he does care, that he does grow. And it would be this very powerful and satisfying moment where Chuck not only avenging his fiancée, but also becoming a better person. And this would lead to episode 9 with Steel against Claws part 3. It would be the closure of the big battle of Hong Kong, where they would all, fight and everything. It's gonna be this huge thing. There are gonna be some casualties. I generally don't know who. Maybe it's gonna be Amara, maybe it's gonna be Stacker, I don't know. There was gonna be some casualties, but I literally had no idea who. This would bring us to episode 10, The King, the finale of book 2. It wasn't gonna be action-packed because we literally just had a 3-parter of one non-stop action. But this, The King, is going to be mainly about them seeing how, okay, they won this fight, but they're never gonna be able to win a global war, because that's what's about to happen, this global Armageddon of war between Earth and the Kaijus, and they're not able to win. But that's when they dive deeper into the lore, and that's also something that's going to be hinted at throughout this entire second book. Lore of not the bad titans, but the good titans, so the earthbound titans, which was lore that was also explained in my first book. You had the earthbound titans, and then you had the Outer World Titans. The king of the Outer World Titans is King Ghidorah, but the Earthbound Titans also had a king, which has been dormant for all this time and would only rise again if Earth was in dire danger. And let's be honest, we all know who this king is, of course, Godzilla. And book 2 would end on this hugely epic note with them summoning Godzilla out of the ocean and having okay, now we have a chance at winning. And that leads us to book 3 called Titans. Book 3 is gonna be one big war, because we have our first episode called Twilight, which is a very calm and really the quiet before the storm, where all the characters we know are preparing for, war. They're preparing for war, but not only that, they prepare for the end, because some people such as Nick, Audrey, Sarasawa, Vivienne, they all know that, okay, this war could potentially lead to the destruction of Earth. And if it's not the destruction of Earth, then most likely the destruction of mankind. Book 3 is gonna have this very grim atmosphere, where they all know we have to defeat this alien threat, kill King Ghidorah, and possibly that will lead to all the other kaijus dying, or that will possibly lead to, the alien force that was sending these kaijus to Earth to just retreat. I don't really know how I was gonna tackle that, but they have to defeat it. And episode 1 is gonna be this very quiet episode with all the characters, having their final moments, blah blah blah. And then episode 2 all the way to episode 6, the final episode, would be this huge global war. They would literally be called Armageddon Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, Part 5. And lots of people will die, and if I'm gonna be very honest with you, I have no idea about the casualties. Raleigh, I don't know if I was gonna kill him or not. Mako, I didn't know if I was gonna kill her or not. Stacker was gonna die. Jake wasn't gonna die. Amara was going to die. Dr. Newton was going to die. Chuck was going to die. Herc, not sure. Hannibal was of course going to die. Gottlieb and Ops, I don't really know. Sarasawa and Vivienne were probably going to die. Admiral Stance was probably gonna die. Ford, I don't know. L, I don't know. Joe and Sandra are already dead by this point, which leaves us Nick, Audrey, and Animal. And Animal, I don't know, but Nick and Audrey would most definitely die. Nick and Audrey, that's really the only death I had envisioned when they were trying to escape this place somewhere, but destruction is all around them, and this huge dust cloud of, you know, magma, like almost like a pyroclastical wave of a volcano, but caused by one of the kaijus. I don't know who was approaching, and it just didn't have any way out. So it was gonna be this very emotionally powerful moment with Nick and Audrey again confessing, well, expressing their love for each other, and that they would hold each other tight and kiss while they would literally be engulfed by this, well, you know, by these flames. That was like the only real death that I had in mind. And episode 6, the final episode, would end most definitely with Godzilla coming up victoriously and him killing King Ghidorah. Not only that, but the Jaegers, the human forces, would also manage to defeat the aliens, you know, probably by the same way, you know, like transporting a bomb, a nuclear bomb through the rift, causing the alien headquarters to blow up, something like that. And Earth would be safe, but like humanity, well, would be destroyed. Like all the cities, like literally global. We're talking all the major cities would be destroyed. It would just be total Armageddon, you know, the apocalypse. But people would survive in underground bunkers, whatever, people would have survived. And it would end on this very bittersweet notes with Godzilla and, well, some of his loyal titans roaming the earth, proclaiming victory. But of course, that's the whole point. Godzilla was never meant to protect mankind. Godzilla was meant to protect Earth, his home. Mankind doesn't really do anything to him, and that's also very clear in this last book, because we're gonna have these very epic fight scenes where Godzilla would fight alongside the Jaegers and would be very cool, very fan service. But Godzilla was never once actively saving people. It was gonna save Earth, and it would be shown throughout several scenes where Godzilla would fight, I don't know, Rodan or whoever, and that lots of people would die horrifically by Godzilla, because they're literally fighting on top of cities. So it's just, of course, the ancient long message of mankind versus nature, and nature always prevails. So it would end on this positive note, sort of, where people would survive and they were gonna have to live underground, you know, restart all over again, restart civilization. But at least now they know that they're safe, and the only thing they have to do is rebuild. But they know out of the ashes rises the phoenix. It's gonna be that kind of ending. And that was my plan for Pacific Rim Kaiju Chronicles. Honestly, guys, talking about this right now, I really am happy with the general story that I was gonna tell, but I couldn't find any logical reasons for characters to be places, especially at the beginning of book 2. And it was starting to get on my nerves, and honestly, life intervened and my interests just dwelled off into different directions. That's it. If this video gets some love, if you guys think, Guy, this sounded awesome, I need to see this, please write it, please, please, please. If you're really gonna be like this, that's okay. That's okay, I'm not being petty or anything, not at all. If you really wanna see this come to life, then sure, in the future I may do something. But at this moment, at this very moment, as I'm telling you guys this, it just doesn't really interest me all that much. If you really want me to, if there's gonna be some reactions, some comments, whatever, that you really want me to do this, then fine, I'll do it in the future. Not right now, but I'll do it in the future. Because honestly, I hope that you guys are also willing to see other stuff from me. That being said, once again, the whole reason that I'm making this video is because I know that some of you really want me to do this, and that alone really means much to me. It means a lot, and I'm thankful. Very, very thankful. So yeah, guys, that was it. I'm currently busy writing a completely new fanfiction series about Elden Ring. It's gonna be completely different, it's gonna be fantasy, but it's gonna be long. It's gonna be this huge fanfiction series, tens of dozens of episodes long, where I'm gonna tell a brand new story set in the world of Elden Ring, of course, with all its main characters, with all its main places and bosses and everything. I hope some of you guys are also excited for that. That being said, this was Insta. Hope you all had a great day. Hope you all understand. Thanks very much.